Hi, I'm Richard Trollinger, and I've actually retired twice from Center College. I retired in 2016 as Vice President for College Relations, and then in 2020 as Senior Philanthropy Advisor. In the last 16 months since I retired, I have enjoyed reading a great deal. It's always been my favorite pastime. My passion is philanthropy. So a lot of the reading that I do, is sort of united by the theme of philanthropy. And that is the theme that sort of ties together the four books I want to highlight in my remarks today. The first was just published in 2020. It's quite a tome at 750 some pages. And the title is Philanthropy from Aristotle to Zuckerberg. It's written by a British scholar and prize-winning writer named Paul Vallely. And he really did his homework well. It's a good, comprehensive overview of philanthropy, starting with the ancient Greeks and going up through the Chan Zuckerberg initiative and current issues in philanthropy, including some of the criticisms of philanthropy. Despite that introduction, it's a very compelling read for anyone who wants to know more about what philanthropy is, how it works, how it's changed through the ages, what some of the current issues in philanthropy are. And it's very well written. There's a lot of history, there's a little bit of philosophy and a little economics, but very well done and a worthwhile read. I have often said, and I really believe, that philanthropic studies is kind of the perfect field for anyone who loves the liberal arts, because you've got history, you've got economics, you've got psychology, religion, sociology and anthropology, and literature, as we'll see in a few minutes. The second book that I would highlight that I've read in recent months was recommended to me by a historian. It's written by a historian, David Oshinsky, who is a historian at the University of Texas. Now, the lady who recommended it to me said that she believed it was the best history book she had ever read. The title is Polio, An American Story, the crusade that mobilized the nation against the 20th century's most feared disease. Oshinsky does a great job of telling the story of the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis and its fundraising arm, the March of Dimes. As a child, I'm old enough to remember in elementary schools the class competition for which class could raise the most money each year for the March of Dimes. March of Dimes funded the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which had been co-founded by U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was himself, of course, a victim of polio. It's a great story. The dust jacket photograph is of children in a school in Kansas lining up, mostly with their parents, for the Salk vaccine. And again, I'm old enough to remember there was a community center in my neighborhood. As a child, I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina. Remember going to the community center with my brother and other children in the neighborhood, lining up for our vaccination with the Salk vaccine. Polio was a feared disease, and it was such a relief when there was a vaccine that was developed. It took 27 years of concerted effort. And there was, the story is also told in Polio of a kind of rivalry between Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin, the two lead researchers who were working on vaccines for polio. Anyway, so there, as with many good books, there are various themes that run through it. But it's a compelling read, and if you like history at all, I liked it again in part because I lived some of this. In fact, as a junior high school student, I preceded the middle school movement. But as a junior high school student, I carried a classmate's tray each day from the cafeteria out to from the serving line out into the cafeteria because he was on crutches, having contracted polio as a small child. So again, this is a story that had particular relevance to me. It was great to read it while the effort was underway to discover a vaccine for COVID, because it helped me understand much of what's involved. It also helped me understand what a miraculous thing it is that we were able to, scientists were able to develop a COVID vaccine really in just a year's time. It took 27 years to develop the polio vaccines. Anyway, moving on from that, another book that I would call to your attention is The Blue Sweater. The subtitle is Bridging the Gap Between Rich and Poor in an Interconnected World. It was initially published in 2009. It is written by Jacqueline Novogratz. She is the founder and CEO of the Acumen Fund. This is a story of personal transformation. It's autobiographical. She gave up a promising career in international banking to tackle the problem of global poverty. Took some years of effort for her to develop a thorough understanding of global poverty and then solutions. Young man for whom I had written a letter of recommendation to the Philanthropic Studies Master's Program at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, sent this book to me when in a phone conversation he learned that I had not read it. He read it as part of an introduction to philanthropy class, and they discussed it in class, but he wanted to discuss it further. So he got a copy that he sent to me, and I'm so glad he did because it's a compelling story of Jacqueline Novogratz's life and the work she has done. And one of the reasons they read this book in an introduction to philanthropy class is that Novogratz and the Acumen Fund sometimes approaches problems with a philanthropic solution. They make grants that relieve hunger or illness. But other times they make grants, charitable grants, that fund for-profit businesses that the people who are being helped then own. And the decision between whether to use a nonprofit or philanthropic solution or a market-based solution is based on which is most sustainable long-term. Anyway, it's a great story. The Blue Sweater, in fact, has some particular meaning that I won't destroy if, in the event that you read the book. You'll be interested to learn that, as I was. And then, lest you should think that I only read nonfiction, the fourth and final book that I want to call to your attention is a great work of fiction. It is Charles Dickens' Bleak House. At just over 900 pages, it is Dickens' longest work, And my friend Milton Riegelman tells me there are those who believe it is Dickens' greatest work. It's like all of Charles Dickens' books, I think. It's a very compelling read. And of course, there are various stories being told throughout. A few years ago, one of my former philanthropic studies professors did a blog in which he recommended 5 books for anyone who was interested in how philanthropy and philanthropists have been portrayed in literature over the years. The first that he recommended was George Eliot's Middlemarch, which I read on vacation a couple of years ago, having not read it in college or since. And the second one was Dickens' Bleak House. And then the third I'm currently reading, which is Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Blithedale Romance. But Bleak House, part of what Dickens does is that he holds philanthropists in some suspicion, and that's quite a tradition among the English to be suspicious of philanthropists' motives. He creates a character named Mrs. Jellyby and her associates. Mrs. Jellyby is much more concerned about the people in faraway lands than she is about her own family or the destitute, the poor who live in London. And Dickens, as he makes pretty clear in this book, has no use for such people. He, in the words of Paul Vallely, who wrote Philanthropy from Aristotle to Zuckerberg, Dickens had a thirst for social justice. And that's very evident along with the other themes and stories that are told in Bleak House. It was such a compelling read that when I finished it for about a week, I just missed Dickens. So I decided to reread Great Expectations in order to get my feel for a while. But these are the 4 books that I would recommend. Paul Vallely's Philanthropy, Polio, An American Story by David Oshinsky, The Blue Sweater by Jacqueline Novogratz, and Charles Dickens' Bleak House. Thank you, and appreciate your interest in Center Reads.